Keanu's quiet truth. In the soft glow of a late afternoon, when the sun was slowly dipping behind tall studio buildings, Keanu Reeves sat alone in a quiet room that felt heavier than the silence around him. He had been inside this small private lounge many times before, yet today it felt different, almost unfamiliar, as if the walls had leaned in closer to hear the thoughts he was trying so hard to hold back. He stared at his hands for a long moment, rubbing his thumb across the edge of a worn script he had carried for years. His eyes looked calm on the outside, but something inside him kept turning, like a door he was afraid to open. The truth he had kept inside for so long had finally reached a point where it was becoming impossible to ignore anymore, and he knew that hiding it was no longer protecting anyone, including himself. It was strange how feelings could stay quiet for years, acting like they didn't exist, only to rise up without warning and demand to be heard. He felt that happening now, and he felt the weight of it pressing against his chest, making it hard to breathe. He had been invited to a private interview for a retrospective documentary about his career, something simple and respectful, nothing dramatic or flashy. He liked those kinds of setups, the ones where he didn't need to pretend or push himself into conversations he didn't choose. But the producers had surprised him with one unexpected topic: Sandra Bullock. They wanted to talk about her, about the early days, about their connection. About moments he had carefully folded and kept out of public reach. He felt something inside him tighten when her name came up, not because it hurt, but because it still mattered more than he let himself admit. Even after all these years, she was someone who stayed in the soft corners of his memory, not fading, not disappearing, just waiting quietly like a bookmark in a story he never finished reading. The interviewer had been kind and gentle, but their last question haunted him long after the cameras stopped rolling. They asked him if he had any regrets connected to Sandra, anything he wished he had said or done differently. He remembered how his throat tightened, how his heart suddenly felt heavier, and how the room seemed to go quiet around him. He didn't answer then. He couldn't. He smiled softly, nodded, and said he needed a moment. But inside, something had shifted, something he could not put back in its place. Now he sat in the lounge alone, thinking about that question, thinking about the years, thinking about her. As he leaned back into the seat, he closed his eyes and let the memories come in. He didn't push them away this time. He let them move through him, slow and heavy, like waves hitting a silent shore. He remembered the first time he met her, how the air around them had felt strangely warm even though they were surrounded by cold metal and rough movie sets. They were both young then, curious, quiet in different ways, and unaware of how deeply people would connect them for decades. He remembered her laugh, loud and real, the kind that made him feel safe for reasons he never fully understood. He remembered her eyes, soft but bright, the way they could switch from playful to serious in an instant. And he remembered the moments between scenes when they would sit on the edge of the set, talking about anything and everything, sometimes about life, sometimes about fears, sometimes about dreams they felt too shy to say out loud to anyone else. It was during those small conversations that he felt something forming between them, something genuine, something he didn't know how to name back then. His single regret was not about love or timing or missed chances in the dramatic sense. It was something quieter, something deeper. He regretted not telling her the truth when he should have, the truth that she made him feel seen during a period of his life when he felt invisible to himself. He regretted not letting her know how much her kindness helped him, how much her laughter softened the heaviness he carried, how much her presence made him feel less alone. He regretted being afraid to open that door, afraid of making things complicated, afraid of ruining the gentle connection they had. He kept his feelings safe inside, but in doing so, he also kept her at a distance she never deserved. The sound of footsteps in the hallway pulled him out of his thoughts. He opened his eyes and heard a soft knock at the door. The assistant peeked inside and told him the interviewer wanted one final answer before they wrapped the day. He nodded gently and stood up, feeling a quiet determination in his chest. He knew he could no longer hide from the truth. For years, he had been careful, private, protective of his emotions and of the people who mattered to him. But something about today felt like a turning point, like the moment before a door opened into a new room he had never explored. He walked back to the small set where the camera lights waited for him. The chair was warm from where he had been sitting earlier. The interviewer smiled kindly, sensing the heaviness that lingered around him. They repeated the question, softly this time, as if they understood that this was not a normal moment. "Do you have any regrets connected to Sandra?" He breathed slowly, letting the silence settle. Then, for the first time in many years, he allowed himself to speak from a place he usually kept hidden. He talked about her kindness, her humor, her quiet strength, her ability to make a room feel lighter. He talked about how their friendship remained one of the things he cherished most from his early career. And then he paused, the kind of pause that felt like a bridge between two truths. "I regret not telling her something," he finally said, his voice soft but steady. "Something simple, something honest, something that mattered more than I realized back then." The interviewer leaned in, curious but respectful. "What was it?" Keanu looked down for a brief moment, then lifted his eyes with a soft, vulnerable expression. "I never told her how much she helped me during a very difficult time in my life. I never told her that her kindness meant more to me than she ever knew. I regret letting that go unsaid." There was silence in the room, a gentle silence that felt almost sacred. The interviewer didn't push further. They could see the emotion in his eyes. The camera operator lowered their equipment slightly, unsure if they should keep recording, but Keanu nodded, telling them silently that it was okay. The moment felt like a confession, not of love, but of gratitude he had held inside for too long. It was a moment of humility, honesty, and softness that he rarely showed in front of cameras. And even though it wasn't dramatic in the loud Hollywood sense, it carried a depth that echoed quietly through the room. Later, when the interview wrapped and people began packing equipment, Keanu stayed seated, staring at the faint reflection of himself in the darkened monitor. Something inside him felt lighter, like he had set down a weight he forgot he was carrying. But at the same time, something else stirred, something that didn't feel resolved. He realized that speaking the truth in front of cameras was only the beginning. He had finally said what he felt, but he hadn't said it to the person who needed to hear it. As he walked out of the studio and into the cool evening air, he felt a soft breeze against his face. The world outside was busy, full of cars and lights and people rushing home, but his mind was stuck on one thought. Maybe the time had finally come to speak to Sandra directly, not as a co-star from the past, not as a distant friend, but as someone who owed her an honest truth from his heart. He reached his car, opened the door, and sat inside, but he didn't start the engine yet. He closed his eyes and took a breath, steady but uncertain. He knew that reaching out would change something, maybe in a small way, maybe in a monumental way. He didn't know how she would react. He didn't know if she even remembered those small moments the way he did. But he knew he had to try. He owed her that much. He pulled out his phone and looked at her name on the screen. It felt strange how one name could hold so much history, so much warmth, so much unspoken truth. He hesitated for a long moment, staring at it, wondering what the right words would even sound like. Then, before he could overthink it, he clicked the message icon. His fingers hovered above the keyboard. The first words were the hardest. He typed slowly, erasing and rewriting, but eventually a simple sentence appeared on the screen, something gentle, something honest. "Hey Sandra, I hope you're well. I wanted to talk to you about something important." He stared at it, wondering if it was too much or too little, but it felt real. It felt right. He hit send before fear could convince him not to. The message went through. Then the screen blinked. Delivered. His heart began to race in a quiet, unfamiliar way. And just as he placed the phone down on the passenger seat, it lit up again. Her reply appeared. And when he read it, his breath caught. "Keanu, I was hoping you'd reach out. I need to tell you something too." The world around him seemed to stop for a moment, everything silent and suspended, as if fate itself had taken a breath. And that was when he realized this conversation was about to open a door neither of them had entered before. End of part 1. Cliffhanger continues. Keanu sat there in the quiet darkness of his car, the glow of Sandra's message lighting up the small space like a fragile spark. He stared at her words again and again, not because he didn't understand them, but because of how deeply they landed inside him. There was something in her sentence that didn't feel casual or polite. It felt heavy, personal, intentional. The way she wrote, "I need to tell you something too," carried a weight that made his heart tighten in a way he had not felt in years. For a moment, he simply leaned back in his seat, gripping the steering wheel as if the world outside had suddenly shifted. He could feel his pulse in his fingers, in his throat, in the center of his chest. He had reached out to tell her a truth he had carried silently, but now he realized he wasn't the only one with something unsaid. It was strange how one small message could pull him back through time so easily, bringing memories he tried to keep quiet rushing back into the light. He remembered old conversations, old moments that had slipped between the lines, moments when she looked like she wanted to say something but stopped herself, moments when he almost said something but convinced himself to stay silent. He wondered how many of those moments existed without either of them acknowledging them. Now her message made every one of those pauses feel louder. He typed back slowly, not wanting to sound rushed or nervous. "I'm here. Whatever it is, you can tell me." He sent it, but the moment he did, he felt a wave of uncertainty wash through him. What if it was something heavy? What if it was something painful? What if it was something he wasn't prepared for? The phone didn't light up immediately, and that silence felt like a long hallway he had to walk through alone. He placed the phone down again and started driving, the streets dim and quiet as he made his way home. The city lights passed in soft streaks through his windows, but his mind was on only one thing: Sandra, her words, her tone. The softness he sensed through those few characters. He didn't know if it was fear, hope, or something in between, but whatever it was, it wouldn't let him rest. When he reached his house, he went inside without turning on any lights. He dropped his keys on the table and walked to the living room, sitting on the edge of the couch with his elbows resting on his knees. He looked at his phone again, still nothing. He tried not to overthink, but that was exactly what he ended up doing. He wondered if she was hesitating, rewriting, thinking, struggling. He knew those feelings well. Words mattered more when they came from a place of truth. And even more when they came after years of silence. Just as he leaned back and exhaled, the phone finally vibrated. Her name appeared on the screen again. He opened the message with a nervous breath. "Can we talk, not by text? I think it's better if we speak, if you're okay with that." Those words felt even heavier, not in a frightening way, but in a way that made him sit up straighter. Her voice echoed in his memory, the way she spoke gently but firmly when something mattered to her. He could almost hear that tone now, hidden inside her text. He typed back slowly, careful not to show the rush of emotion he felt. "Yeah, I'm here. Call whenever you're ready." He stared at the screen for a long moment, waiting. But instead of a call, another message appeared. "Not tonight. I need to gather myself first. Tomorrow morning, please." Keanu nodded to himself, even though she couldn't see him. He understood that kind of timing, when something is too heavy to rush. When the heart needs a moment before the words come out. It made him feel strangely calm to know she cared enough to prepare herself. He typed, "Of course, tomorrow morning is fine. I'll be here." He expected that to be the end of the conversation for the night, but she sent one more message before disappearing. "Thank you." Two simple words, but they carried softness, familiarity, and a hint of something unspoken, something he couldn't place yet, something that tugged gently at the part of him he had kept still for years. He set the phone down on the table and sat there for a long time, letting the silence of the house wrap around him. It felt almost like waiting for dawn, that fragile space between darkness and light where everything is quiet, where nothing has happened yet but something is coming. As he leaned his head back against the couch, he realized he wasn't afraid of tomorrow. He was curious, hopeful, nervous, all at once. The hours of the night passed slowly, and even though he tried to sleep, his thoughts kept circling around the same memories. He remembered the times when they finished shooting after a long day and ended up laughing about something silly at the craft table. He remembered the way she touched his arm once when he looked tired, just a small gesture of care, but gentle enough to stay with him for years. He remembered the day she brought him a cup of coffee without asking if he wanted one. She simply said, "You look like you need this," and walked away with a smile. She always knew how to make small things feel important. As he lay awake, he thought about the last time they saw each other in person. It had been at a charity event almost 2 years ago. They hugged, exchanged a few warm words, promised to catch up soon, but soon never came. Life happened. Schedules drifted. People drifted. But the feeling he had that night stayed with him. When he hugged her, something inside him tightened, something familiar, something he ignored because he didn't know what to do with it. Maybe she felt something too. Maybe that was what tomorrow would reveal. Morning arrived slowly, the light creeping through the blinds, warm and gentle. Keanu sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, not coffee, because coffee made him jittery and he didn't want his nerves to show when they spoke. His phone lay on the table in front of him, screen facing up, waiting. 8 minutes passed, then 12, then 23. He wasn't impatient, but he felt each minute stretch like a thin string. At last, the phone vibrated. "Incoming call." "Sandra." His breath caught for a second before he answered. "Hey," he said softly. Her voice on the other end was warm but unsteady, like she had been thinking all morning. "Hey," she replied. "Thank you for picking up." "Of course, I'm here," he said gently. There was a pause, a long one. He didn't rush her. He knew she needed space to find her words. Finally, she exhaled softly. "I saw a clip from your interview," she began. Someone sent it to me before the full thing even aired. They said you mentioned something about me, something you regretted. Keanu felt his chest tighten. Yeah, he said quietly, I did. It surprised me, she continued, her voice soft but steady now. Not because you said something emotional, but because I always felt like there was something left unspoken between us. And hearing that you had a regret made me wonder if you felt that gap too. He leaned back slightly, absorbing her words. I did, he whispered, for a long time. She paused again as if she was choosing her next words carefully. You said you regretted not telling me something, she said. Not telling me how much I helped you, how my kindness mattered to you. She took a slow breath. That meant a lot to hear, more than you know. Keanu felt a warmth in his chest, a soft ache that came from emotions he hadn't let himself feel openly. I should have told you years ago, he said. I just didn't know how. I understand, she answered gently. You were going through a lot, I knew that. I didn't want to ask questions you weren't ready to answer. Her voice trembled slightly, not with sadness, but with something deeper. But Keanu, I need to tell you something too, something I've kept quiet for a long time. He felt the air shift around him, like the moment before a truth reveals itself. I'm listening, he said softly. She hesitated. Do you remember that time near the end of filming? She asked. When we sat on the edge of the set at night, talking about family, fears, life, all those things we never talked about around other people. He remembered it immediately. He could still see her sitting there, legs crossed, jacket wrapped around her shoulders, the night warm but the wind chilly. The lighting from the set cast soft shadows on her face, making the moment feel strangely intimate. Yeah, he said. Of course I remember. You told me something personal that night, she said quietly. Something vulnerable, and when you finished, I wanted to tell you something too, something important, but I got scared. I held back, and I've regretted that ever since. Keanu felt his breath grow shallow. He didn't speak. He let her continue. I wanted to tell you that you helped me too, she said. More than you realized. I was going through something that year, something painful, and I never told anyone. But being around you made it easier. You made things feel safe, comfortable, real. I didn't have that with many people. Her voice softened, trembling slightly. And I always wished I had told you that. Keanu closed his eyes, letting her words sink into him like a slow, warm tide. He had suspected she carried something heavy back then, but she never showed it, never let it out in the open. To hear her say it now, after all these years, made something inside him shift, something that felt like understanding, connection, and a quiet ache. Sandra, he whispered, I wish you would have told me. I know, she said. I wish I would have too. Another pause, long, heavy, meaningful. That's not the only thing, she added suddenly, her voice changing, becoming quieter, almost fragile. There's something else, something I never said, something I should have said back then. Keanu sat up straight. His heart thumped harder, slowly but with force. What is it? He asked gently. Her voice trembled again. I think back then I cared about you more than I let myself admit, and I didn't know how to say it. The world around him went still, completely still. He opened his mouth to speak, but before he could, she whispered one last thing, soft, shaky, honest. And part of me wonders if you felt anything too. She waited. He stayed silent, but not because he didn't know the answer. It was because the truth inside him was suddenly too heavy to say out loud. And she noticed his silence. Keanu, she whispered, please say something. His lips parted, and then his phone beeped loudly. The call interrupted. The line went dead. Call dropped. He stared at the phone in shock, heartbeat racing, breath uneven, knowing her question still hung between them like a fragile thread. And as the phone lit up again with her name calling back, he realized this conversation had just crossed into a place neither of them could ever step back from the moment the call cut off. Keanu felt a strange shock ripple through him, like the air around him had been pulled away too suddenly. He stared at his phone, the screen going dark again, reflecting part of his face back at him in the stillness of the morning light. It wasn't the kind of technical glitch that usually happened during calm moments. This felt like something that had split a moment in half, right when things were the heaviest, right when her voice trembled with something fragile and deeply personal. He could still hear her words echoing in his ears, soft and hesitant, like she had spoken them with her eyes closed. I cared about you more than I admitted. Did you ever feel anything too? That question didn't fade. It didn't float away. It clung to him with a kind of quiet gravity that made his chest tighten. He had gone years without thinking about what if, convincing himself it didn't matter, that their paths had been written in soft lines that never crossed where it counted. But now her voice had opened a door he had kept locked for a long time. He felt something shifting inside him, something that had slept quietly but was waking now, piece by piece. The phone buzzed again. Her name lit up the screen. He swallowed and answered quickly. Sandra. Her breath came through the line first, shaky, the sound of someone who had just been jolted out of a vulnerable moment. I'm so sorry, she said. My phone dropped the call. I didn't mean to leave you in silence like that. It probably sounded. No, he said gently, interrupting her. It's okay. I thought I lost connection on my end. She exhaled long and relieved. Okay, good, because the timing felt terrible. She paused, her voice quieter. I don't want to scare you away, Keanu. I didn't mean to throw something heavy at you. He leaned back in his seat, closing his eyes for a moment as he breathed slowly. You didn't scare me, he said softly. You just surprised me, that's all. Another silence passed, warm but tense, like two people standing on opposite sides of a threshold, waiting to see who would take the next step. I didn't plan to say any of that, she admitted quietly. But when you talked about your regret, it brought back memories I kept pushing away. Things I didn't want to examine, feelings I didn't want to confuse. I guess hearing you say you held something inside made me realize I did the same. Keanu's fingers brushed over the edge of the table, slow and thoughtful. I understand, he whispered, more than you know. Did it make things uncomfortable? She asked suddenly. Her voice carried worry, fear of overstepping, fear of ruining something fragile. He shook his head even though she couldn't see him. No, he said, it didn't. She breathed out slowly, a soft sigh filled with mixed relief and uncertainty. Good. He wanted to say more, to tell her how deeply her honesty had landed. But he needed a moment, a breath, a space between her confession and his response. He didn't want to speak with emotion running too fast. He didn't want to say something he couldn't follow through with. She deserved clarity, not confusion. Do you remember that last charity event? He asked gently. The one 2 years ago. Her voice warmed. Yeah, I do. You wore that dark suit and barely stayed long because you had another event the next morning. And you wore that silver dress, he added softly. You hugged me so tight when I arrived that I thought something was wrong. She let out a small, breathy laugh. I remember. I was having a rough week, seeing you felt grounding honestly. I felt something too that night, he admitted. I just didn't know what to do with it. Her breath caught. He heard it clearly, the way it halted halfway, the way it carried surprise and something deeper. You did, she whispered. Yeah, he said, his voice low, almost vulnerable. But I didn't let myself think about it for long. I didn't want to make anything weird between us. She hummed softly, a sound that carried understanding but also a quiet ache. We were always good at hiding the complicated things, she said gently. Maybe too good, he replied. Another pause, soft, heavy, intimate in the way silence becomes intimate when two people understand what is not being said. Sandra, he said slowly, your question earlier, you asked if I ever felt anything too. She tensed. He could hear it in the way her breath changed, the way the line grew still, the way she prepared herself for something she wasn't sure she wanted to hear. He continued carefully. I'm not avoiding the question, I just want to answer it the right way. Take your time, she whispered. He nodded to himself, letting his thoughts settle. He thought about the past, the looks they shared, the unspoken comfort, the small moments that felt bigger than either of them admitted. He thought about the quiet connection that had lasted decades without needing loud declarations. And he realized that the truth he carried was not something simple, not something that fit neatly into a single yes or no. But before he could speak, she broke the silence. Keanu, her voice was softer than before, almost trembling again. There's something else I need to tell you before you answer. He stopped. Okay, what is it? She inhaled slowly. He could hear her steadying herself, building courage she hadn't touched in years. I wasn't sure if I should say this, she began. But that night on set, the night when we talked about our fears and families, I didn't tell you everything. He frowned gently. What do you mean? I was dealing with something heavy that year, she said softly. Something emotional, something that made it hard for me to trust anyone. I was hurt by someone close to me. And for months, I didn't feel safe opening up to anyone. I'm sorry, he whispered. But you, she continued. You made me feel safe without even knowing it. You didn't push, you didn't expect anything, you just let me be. And I think that's why I started to care more than I should have. He felt something tight pull inside him. There's no should have, he said gently. Maybe not, she replied. But back then, I believed there was. I thought if I admitted how much I relied on you emotionally, I would complicate your life. I didn't want to add weight to anything you were already carrying. He closed his eyes. The thought of her suffering silently, choosing to protect him instead of herself, made his chest ache. She wasn't done. And then, she added quietly, when the movie ended and we went our separate ways, I thought letting go of those feelings would be easy. But they didn't go away, Keanu. They stayed, for a long time, longer than I ever expected. His fingers tightened slightly around the phone. He breathed out slowly. I wish I'd known. I didn't want you to know, she said quickly, almost defensively. I didn't want you to feel trapped or confused. I didn't want it to ruin anything. It wouldn't have ruined anything, he said. You don't know that, she whispered back. He paused, maybe not, but I know we lost time because of it. Her voice trembled again. I know. Another silence fell between them. It was heavy, but it wasn't painful. It was the kind of silence that exists when two people finally stand at the edge of something real. Keanu, she said softly. Yeah. Does any part of you regret that we never talked about this back then? He breathed in deeply, the question sinking into him. I regret it every time I remember us laughing on set, he said quietly. I regret it every time I think of how easy it was to talk to you. I regret it when I think of that final night we worked together and how we said goodbye like it was nothing. Her breath hitched. That night was hard for me too, she whispered. I kept thinking about turning around, he admitted. I kept waiting for you too, she whispered back. He froze. Her honesty was like a gentle punch to the chest, soft but powerful, unexpected but true. You were waiting for me? He asked, voice low. Yes, she whispered. I waited, and when you didn't come back, I convinced myself you didn't feel anything at all. I didn't turn around because I was scared, he confessed. I didn't think I was enough, not for you, not back then. She inhaled sharply. Keanu, you were more than enough. He closed his eyes, feeling that truth hit him harder than he expected. But before he could answer, the doorbell rang. Loud, sharp, unexpected. He sat up straight, startled. He looked toward the door, confused. He wasn't expecting anyone. No one visited unannounced. No one came this early. The bell rang again, louder this time, like someone urgent was on the other side. Sandra, he whispered, someone's at my door. Her voice tensed instantly. Do you know who? No, he said, walking slowly toward the entryway. Be careful, she whispered. He reached the door, hesitated, opened it, and froze, standing there, looking anxious, unsure, and completely out of place. Was Sandra, in person, right in front of him, her phone still pressed to her ear, her eyes full of the same fear, hope, and vulnerability he had been feeling all morning. I couldn't wait, she whispered in a trembling voice. The phone call was still connected between them. She ended it slowly, lowering her hand. He did the same. They stood face to face, in a silence that felt louder than anything either of them had said so far. His heart pounded. Hers seemed to mirror it. Sandra, he breathed, unable to believe she was really there. I needed to see you, she said softly. I needed to say what I couldn't say over the phone. Before he could respond, her eyes glistened. Her lips trembled. She took a step forward. Because there's something else you don't know, she whispered, voice breaking slightly. Something that changes everything. Keanu's breath stopped. She looked at him with a softness that carried years of unspoken truth. And then, right before she could speak, a car door slammed outside. Someone shouted her name. Her expression changed instantly. Fear flashed in her eyes. She grabbed his arm. Keanu, she whispered urgently, I didn't come alone and you're not going to like what's happening. For a moment, Keanu could not move. He stood frozen in the doorway, the morning light falling across both of them as if the world itself had paused to witness the moment. Sandra's hand was gripping his arm tightly, not in fear of him, but in fear of something she had brought with her. Her eyes flicked toward the street behind her, the same street that had seemed completely normal just minutes earlier. Now there was tension in her shoulders, a tremble in her breath, a warning in the way she held on to him. He followed her gaze slowly, trying to understand what had shaken her so quickly. A man stepped out of a car parked a short distance away. He looked frustrated, pacing near the curb as if he was trying to decide whether to walk toward them or keep his distance. Keanu couldn't recognize him from where he stood, but he could tell by the way Sandra's hand tightened that this person wasn't a friend. She swallowed, her voice low and trembling. "Keanu, this is what I couldn't explain over the phone." Keanu gently guided her inside, closing the door behind them, blocking out the man's voice calling her name again. She leaned back against the door for a moment, closing her eyes as if she needed to catch her breath. He watched her quietly, giving her space, giving her time. He could see the exhaustion in her expression, the heaviness she had been carrying long before she even arrived at his doorstep. It was not the kind of worry that came from a misunderstanding or a simple disagreement. This was deeper, older, something she had endured on her own for far too long. "Sandra," he said softly, "you're shaking." She opened her eyes slowly, and in them he saw something he hadn't seen in years: fear. Not panic, not danger, but the kind of fear that comes from years of swallowing emotions, from being strong for everyone else while silently breaking apart inside. He took a slow step closer. She breathed in, breathed out, trying to steady herself. "I wasn't planning to come here," she began, her voice soft. "I wasn't planning to show up like this, but when we talked this morning, something in me just broke. I couldn't keep holding everything inside." He nodded gently. "You don't have to hold anything alone, not here." She looked at him with a mixture of relief and sadness. "You always said things like that without saying them, even back then." He waited for her to continue, letting her choose her pace. She finally moved away from the door and walked into his living room, her steps slow, almost hesitant. She looked around as if she needed the quiet to settle her thoughts. He followed her, keeping a respectful distance until she stopped near the window, looking out cautiously to make sure the man hadn't come closer. "He won't come here," she whispered, almost to herself. "He knows better. He knows I won't talk to him when I'm upset." Keanu frowned softly. "Who is he?" She let out a long breath. "He's someone I trusted, someone I shouldn't have trusted for so long." She walked away from the window and sat on the couch, her hands clasped tightly together on her lap. Her shoulders were tense, her eyes unfocused, as if she was trying to pull memories out of places she had locked them away. Keanu sat down beside her, leaving just enough space to show he wasn't crowding her, but close enough to let her know she wasn't alone. "I didn't tell you everything that happened back then," she said quietly. "The year we worked together, I wasn't only dealing with personal struggles. I was dealing with someone who didn't respect my boundaries, someone who kept pushing himself into my life." His chest tightened. "That man outside." She nodded slowly. "We had a past, not a relationship, not a partnership, something in between that I never wanted, something that started with kindness and shifted into control. He always made me feel guilty when I pulled away, always acted wounded when I created space." She swallowed hard. "I thought I ended it years ago, but he always came back during moments when I felt vulnerable, and I let it happen more times than I want to admit." Keanu listened quietly, absorbing every word. He didn't interrupt her. He didn't try to solve it. He simply gave her the space she needed, something she rarely received from people who always wanted something from her. "The reason I couldn't tell you how much you meant to me back then," she continued, "was because he convinced me that I was too emotional, too fragile, too dependent on the wrong people. I started doubting my instincts. I started believing I would ruin everything if I opened up to you." Keanu felt something deep inside him twist painfully. "You weren't fragile," he said softly. "You were hurting." "I know that now," she whispered, "but I didn't know it then. I thought caring about someone else, someone good, someone kind." She paused, her voice breaking. "I thought it meant I was betraying myself." He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, trying to process everything she was sharing. "And now," he asked gently, "what made today different?" She took a long, trembling breath. "Last night, the same person who used to tell me I was unstable came to see me again. He said some things that pushed every old fear I thought I had buried." She wiped a tear that slipped down her cheek. "When he left, I felt that old weight come back, That old doubt, that old emptiness. She looked at Keanu slowly, her eyes soft and raw. Then I saw your interview. You said you regretted not telling me something honest, something real, something from your heart. He felt his breath slow. And that made you come here? It made me remember what safety feels like, she whispered. And I realized I couldn't keep lying to myself about how deeply our connection mattered, how deeply it still matters. She looked away, her eyes glistening. I needed to tell you that in person, because if I didn't say it now, I never would. Keanu's heart thumped heavily in his chest. Sandra. Before you answer anything, she said quietly, I need to finish explaining. He nodded, letting her speak. She took another breath. You asked if I waited for you to turn around that night on set, she said. I did, but the truth is, I wasn't just waiting for you to look back. I was waiting for a moment when I could finally feel free enough to choose something good for myself. But that man had convinced me for years that I didn't deserve that. Keanu clenched his jaw slightly, not in anger at her, but in anger at the pain she had endured. You deserved peace, he said softly. You deserved safety, you deserved honesty. She shook her head slowly. I wasn't strong enough back then, but today, when you messaged me, something in me shifted, and I realized I needed to talk to you before I could move forward in any part of my life. Keanu leaned closer, just a little enough to show he was present, fully and gently. I'm here, he said again, his voice soft, steady. She wiped her cheek, tears she hadn't planned to shed falling freely now. I'm sorry I never told you any of this, she whispered. I'm sorry I pulled away when I should have trusted you. I'm sorry I let someone else's voice drown out mine. And most of all, she paused, her voice trembling, I'm sorry I made you think you weren't enough. He inhaled deeply, feeling her words carve into something inside him that he had long believed was unchangeable. You didn't make me think that, he said softly. I already believed it, you just didn't know. She looked at him with disbelief and sadness. You, not enough, Keanu, you were one of the few people who made me feel like myself. He held her gaze, the air between them thick with things that had stayed unsaid for far too long. Then we were both wrong, he whispered, and we both lost something because of it. She nodded, tears clinging to her lashes. I don't want to lose anything else. Neither of them spoke for a long moment. The silence was heavy but warm, filled with emotion that had gone unspoken for decades. He wanted to reach out to take her hand, to tell her he was here, that he always had been. But he hesitated, giving her time to decide if she wanted closeness, not assuming it. Finally, she spoke again, her voice soft and trembling. Keanu, I didn't come here just to tell you about the past. She looked at her hands, clasped together so tightly her knuckles had gone pale. I came because something happened last night that scared me, not physically, emotionally. He leaned in slightly. What happened? She swallowed hard. That man, he told me something that made me realize my life has been shaped by fear for far too long. He said I was still the same insecure person I was years ago, and for a moment, I believed him again. She wiped her cheek. And I hated myself for it. He felt his chest tighten painfully. I'm sorry he said that to you. I left my house early this morning, she continued, because I didn't want to sit with those feelings alone. I didn't want to go to anyone who only saw me as strong or funny or perfect. I needed to go to someone who knew me before all the noise. Keanu's voice softened, almost a whisper, and you chose me. Yes, she said, her voice breaking, because you were the one person who never made me feel small. He wanted to say something comforting, something gentle, but before he could, a loud knock sounded at the door. Not a gentle one. A forceful one. She froze instantly. Keanu stood up slowly, his muscles tensing, his breath steadying. Don't worry, he murmured. I'm here. Another knock. Louder. More urgent. He walked toward the door, stopping a few feet away. Sandra stood up behind him, panic flickering in her eyes. Keanu, she whispered, her voice shaking, don't open it, please. But the knocking didn't stop. And then, a voice called from outside. A voice neither of them expected. A voice that didn't belong to the man she feared. Mr. Reeves, it's urgent, please open the door. Keanu froze. Sandra stared at him. The voice wasn't angry, it wasn't familiar. It was official. Authoritative. Something was happening outside that neither of them had prepared for. He reached for the door slowly. Sandra grabbed his arm again, whispering, "Keanu, please be careful." He nodded, opened the door, and what he saw made his breath catch in his throat. Someone was standing there with news that would change everything, the truth they never expected. The moment Keanu opened the door, the air in the room shifted, tightening with an energy neither he nor Sandra could explain. Standing outside was a man dressed in a dark jacket with an identification badge clipped to the front. His posture was firm but not threatening, and his eyes carried a seriousness that made Sandra step closer to Keanu instinctively, as if the presence of a stranger had pushed every protective instinct inside her to the surface. The man cleared his throat politely. "Mr. Reeves," he said in a calm, steady voice, "I'm sorry to show up like this unannounced, but we need to speak with you. It's urgent." Keanu's hand remained on the door, steady but tense. "What's going on?" he asked, keeping his voice low, cautious. He glanced behind him briefly to check on Sandra, who watched with a mixture of worry and confusion. The man shifted slightly, lowering his voice. "We received a report this morning. Your property might have been compromised. We were instructed to notify you directly." Keanu frowned, the heaviness of recent events making it hard to separate one stress from another. "Compromised how?" The man hesitated before answering. "There have been sightings of someone trying to approach your home, someone who claimed he was here to speak with you and Ms. Bullock." Sandra stiffened instantly, her breath catching in her throat. Keanu felt the change in her energy even before he looked back at her. He understood immediately who the man was talking about. Keanu turned back to the officer. "When did this happen?" "Earlier this morning," the man replied. "Neighbors reported unusual behavior. The individual seemed agitated, pacing, waiting." He paused, lowering his gaze for a moment. "We didn't want to take chances." Sandra's voice broke the silence, quiet but tense. "Is he still out there?" The officer's eyes flicked toward her with recognition, not of her fame, but of her distress. "We talked to him," he said calmly. "He's still parked down the street. He won't step onto this property, but we can't remove him unless a formal report is made." Sandra's shoulders dropped a little, not in relief, but in exhaustion. She turned away, her hand covering her mouth for a moment as if she needed a second to gather herself. Keanu's heart tightened at the sight of her vulnerability, something she rarely let anyone see. The officer continued, shifting his focus back to Keanu. "We're here to make sure you're both safe, that's all," he sighed lightly, "and to see if either of you would like to file a formal complaint." Keanu glanced at Sandra again. Her eyes were glassy, full of emotions pulling her in different directions. Fear, shame, regret, strength, guilt, exhaustion, all tangled together like threads she had been trying to untie for years. Keanu stepped slightly to the side, blocking the officer's view of her not aggressively but protectively. "Thank you," he said gently. "We appreciate you stopping by, but right now we need a moment." The officer nodded respectfully. "Of course, if you need anything or if he becomes aggressive, call immediately." He handed Keanu a small card with a number and stepped back. "We'll be watching the street for the next few hours just in case." Then he turned and walked toward his vehicle, leaving Keanu standing in the doorway with a storm of emotions swirling inside him. Keanu closed the door slowly and turned toward Sandra, who was now sitting on the edge of his couch, her head bowed, her hands clasped so tightly together he could see her knuckles turning pale. The moment the lock clicked, she whispered, "I didn't want this to happen. I didn't want him to follow me. I didn't think he would." He walked toward her quietly, his footsteps soft but steady. "It's not your fault," he said gently. She shook her head. "But it feels like it is. I didn't handle things the way I should have. I didn't cut him off clean. I didn't set strong enough boundaries. I let this go on too long. And now." Her voice trembled, breaking into something raw. Keanu sat beside her, leaving a space just large enough to show respect, but close enough to show he wasn't going anywhere. "Sandra," he said softly, "you don't have to explain anything right now. You're safe, I promise." She wiped her cheek quickly, as if embarrassed by the tears. "I hate that he's showing up like this. I hate that he's still trying to control things. I hate that you're seeing me like this." "I don't see weakness," Keanu whispered. "I see someone who's been carrying too much alone for too long." She looked at him, her brows tightening as emotion swelled again. "You always say things like that," she whispered bitterly, but not at him, at herself. "And I never know what to do with them." "You don't have to do anything with them," he said. Not today, not right now. She inhaled shakily. I'm so tired, Keanu. I'm tired of pretending I'm okay. I'm tired of telling people I'm fine. I'm tired of smiling when everything inside me feels stretched thin. He nodded gently. You don't have to pretend here. Her shoulders trembled. Why did I wait so long to tell you all this? He breathed slowly, carefully. Because you were protecting yourself, and maybe you were protecting me too. She looked up sharply, surprised. Protecting you. Yeah, he said softly. You said you didn't want to complicate my life. You said you didn't want to make things heavier. But the truth is, sometimes two people don't open up because they think they're protecting each other, even if it means they lose something. Her lips parted slightly, her voice barely a breath. Did we lose something? His heart thumped once hard. He looked at her slowly, letting the weight of the question settle in the air between them. I think we lost time, he said quietly, time we didn't have to lose. Her eyes glistened again, not with fear this time, but with something softer, something deeper. She shifted closer, just slightly, as if she was testing the air between them. Keanu, earlier, when I asked you if you ever felt something too, you didn't answer. He swallowed, feeling the question wrap around him like a slow tide. You're right, he said softly. I didn't. She waited, her breathing soft, her eyes searching his face for something unspoken. I wasn't avoiding the question, he continued. I just didn't want to answer it while you were hurting. It didn't feel fair or right. And now, she whispered. He turned his body toward her slightly, his voice steady. Now I think you deserve the truth. She held her breath, stilling completely, as if the next words would shape the rest of the space between them. He exhaled slowly. Yes, Sandra, he said gently. I did feel something too, I just didn't know how to say it. I didn't think I had the right to. Her breath trembled. Tears welled in her eyes again, but this time they weren't from fear or pain. They were from something softer, something fragile and warm. Keanu, she whispered, her voice breaking. He looked at her with a tenderness he had never allowed himself to show before. I cared about you, I still do, more than I ever admitted. She covered her mouth with her hand, overwhelmed by a wave of emotions she had kept buried for years. I wish I had known, she whispered. I wish I had let myself believe that. He shook his head gently. Maybe we weren't ready back then, maybe the timing wasn't right, but we're here now, talking, finally. She nodded slowly, breathing in, breathing out, trying to steady the storm inside her. I don't know what to do, she whispered. I don't know how to move forward without ruining everything. He leaned closer, his voice steady, calm. You don't have to know today, you just have to let yourself feel safe here. We figure out the rest together, slowly. She closed her eyes, letting those words wash over her like warm sunlight after a long winter. Keanu, she whispered, her voice filled with quiet truth. I haven't felt safe in a very long time. Then let today be the first time, he replied gently. For the first time since she arrived, she let herself breathe deeply. She reached out slowly, nervously, and placed her hand on top of his. He didn't move. He didn't flinch. He let her stay there, let her take the lead, let her feel the connection she had feared for so long. Their hands stayed touching, warm and steady, a silent bridge between two hearts that had been scared for too many years. And then, outside, a sudden crash, a loud, sharp smash, like glass shattering or metal scraping. Sandra jerked upright instantly, her hand gripping his tightly. Keanu stood, his body tensing. Someone outside shouted. Another crash followed. And then, a voice, angry and familiar, broke through the chaos. Sandra, open the door, now. Her face went completely pale. Keanu, she whispered, trembling, I think he just lost control, the moment that changed everything. The crash outside echoed through the quiet of the room like a warning shot, sharp enough to make Sandra flinch and cling to Keanu's arm with trembling fingers. Her breath hitched, her heartbeat racing loud enough that she could hear it in her ears. Keanu immediately stepped in front of her in a protective reflex, his posture calm but alert, his eyes fixed on the door as another angry voice rose from outside. Sandra recognized it instantly. It was the same voice she had tried to forget for years, the same voice that had once pulled her into emotional storms and made her doubt her own strength. Now it filled the outside of Keanu's home with raw frustration. Sandra, the man shouted again. Come outside, we need to talk, you can't just disappear like this. Keanu breathed slowly, steady and controlled. Stay behind me, he whispered softly, not looking back but gently tightening his stance. You're safe here. She nodded, her voice stuck in her throat, her fingers gripping the fabric of his shirt. She felt small, shaken, but also relieved that she wasn't alone this time. She wasn't standing in front of this fear by herself. Keanu was there, steady as a wall between her and the chaos. Another crash rang out, this time the sound of something metal being kicked hard. Maybe the trash bin, maybe part of the fence. The man outside was losing control, just like she feared. Keanu stepped toward the door, but before he could reach it, there was a loud pounding, someone knocking again, but this time with fists instead of knuckles. Hey, open up, we're not done talking, Sandra. Keanu winced slightly at the aggression in the man's voice. He reached for the doorknob but didn't open it. Instead, he spoke through the heavy wood with calm authority. You need to leave, right now. The man stopped pounding, his voice switching from angry to mocking. And who are you to tell me that, Keanu? You don't know what's going on. This is between me and her. It stopped being between you and her the moment you followed her to my house, Keanu replied, still calm but firm. You need to go. A long silence followed, broken only by a shaky breath from Sandra. She held onto Keanu's arm as if it was the only steady thing in her world. The man outside finally spoke again, but the anger in his voice had sharp edges now. She came running to you because she's confused. She doesn't know what she wants. She's always been like that. Sandra's grip tightened painfully. Keanu felt the insult land deeply inside her, the way old wounds react when someone presses exactly where it hurts. He breathed slowly, steadying himself before speaking. She knows exactly what she wants, he said, and right now she doesn't want to talk to you. Silence again. Then footsteps. But not walking away. Walking toward the window. The man shouted louder, Sandra, look at me, don't hide behind him. Keanu stepped back, positioning himself so Sandra remained fully behind him. He didn't raise his voice, didn't let the situation escalate. He simply stood there, calm and protective, a presence that felt like a barrier she never had before. But just as the man outside was about to move again, a police car pulled up with quick, controlled urgency. The same officer from earlier stepped out, this time with another officer beside him. They approached the man quickly, speaking with clear commands. Sandra couldn't hear everything through the door, but the man's tone shifted from loud and demanding to defensive and frustrated. The officers didn't give him room to argue. Sir, step back now. We warned you earlier. You were told to stay away. You cannot approach this property again. Sandra exhaled shakily, her knees weakening as she leaned slightly into Keanu for support. He placed a gentle hand on her back, grounding her. It's okay, he whispered. They're handling it. Outside, the man protested weakly, but the officers kept their distance firm and professional. They directed him toward his car, their voices firm but controlled. After a tense minute, the man finally got into his vehicle and drove off, tires skidding slightly as he pulled away faster than necessary. The officers remained for another moment, watching until the car disappeared down the street. Then they knocked gently on the door. This time, Keanu opened it without hesitation. The officer nodded respectfully. He's gone. We made it clear he's not to return. If he does, we'll escalate it. Keanu nodded. Thank you. The officer's eyes softened when he saw Sandra standing a few feet back, holding her arms around herself. Ms. Bullock, he said gently, you don't deserve fear like that. If you want help filing a protective order, we can walk you through it. She nodded slowly, but she didn't speak. She looked exhausted, emotionally drained, but also relieved. The officer left them with the reassurance that they'd patrol the area for a while longer, just to be safe. When the door closed and silence settled again, Sandra finally let out a sob. Not loud, not broken, but the quiet kind that comes after holding too much inside for too long. Keanu turned toward her instantly, his face full of concern. Hey, he whispered, stepping closer. You're okay, he's gone. She shook her head, tears sliding down her cheeks. I didn't want you to see this. I didn't want you to see me like this. I feel ashamed. He lifted her chin gently with 2 fingers, guiding her eyes toward his. You have nothing to be ashamed of, he said softly but firmly. Nothing. She exhaled shakily. I've been carrying this for so long, Keanu, and part of me thought if I told you, you'd think less of me. He felt something twist inside him, something painful but full of compassion. "I could never think less of you," he said quietly. "If anything, I think more of you. You survived something heavy. You held yourself together when someone else tried to tear you apart. That takes strength most people never understand." She wiped her eyes slowly, her breathing uneven but calming. "I didn't feel strong." "You are," he whispered. "Strength isn't about never breaking. It's about being brave enough to stand up again." She looked at him, searching his face for truth. And what she saw there, softness, worry, respect, caring, made her chest ache in a different way than before. Not from pain, from relief. "Keanu," she whispered, her voice fragile, "I don't know what happens next. I don't know what we are now. I don't want to rush anything. I don't want to make emotions messy again." He nodded slowly. "We don't have to know everything today," he said. "We take it one step at a time, one breath at a time, together." She hesitated, then took a slow step toward him. "Together," she repeated softly, as if testing the word in her mouth, feeling the weight of it, the warmth of it. Keanu reached for her hand gently, waiting for her to pull back if she wasn't ready. But she didn't. She let him hold it, her fingers trembling for a moment before settling into his grasp. "I don't want to run anymore," she whispered. "I've been running from myself for years, running from fear, running from us." Keanu's eyes softened. "You don't have to run." She touched her forehead to his chest for a moment, letting herself sink into the safety she had always felt around him. He placed a careful hand on the back of her head, not pulling her closer, not rushing her, just steady, letting her breathe. After a long moment, she stepped back and wiped her cheeks. "Thank you," she whispered. "Not for today, for everything, for all the moments I pretended I didn't need you when I did." He shook his head gently. "You don't owe me thanks. I'm here because I want to be." Her lips trembled into the smallest, softest smile. "You always say things I'm not ready to hear." "Maybe you're ready now," he whispered. She looked into his eyes, deep and steady, and for the first time in years, she felt peace settle into her chest instead of fear. "Maybe I am," she whispered back. The air between them warmed, softened by honesty, healed by truth. They stood there, two people who had been connected by years of silence, finally speaking without walls. When she finally spoke again, her voice was quiet but sure. "Keanu, if we try this, whatever this is, we take it slow, gentle, real." He nodded, a soft warmth forming behind his eyes. "Slow is good, gentle is good, real is good." She exhaled, her shoulders relaxing as if a weight had finally lifted. "And no more regrets," she added softly. He smiled, small, warm, real. "No more regrets." They walked toward the couch together, still holding hands, not needing to say anything else for the moment. The silence between them was no longer heavy or frightening. It was calm, comfortable, healing. Outside, the world continued its quiet movements. But inside, something had shifted. Something old had been released. Something new had begun. Not a dramatic declaration. Not a sudden ending. But a gentle new beginning, built on respect, truth, kindness, and the courage to finally speak what had stayed silent for too long. And as they sat together, shoulders brushing softly, breathing in the safety of the moment, both of them felt the same quiet realization. Sometimes the hardest truths lead to the softest healing. And sometimes two people find each other right at the moment they are finally ready.